Okay, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, depending on where in the world you're tuning in from. I'm in Sydney today, and as you can probably see behind me, the weather is pretty terrible. For those of you who I haven't met, my name is Ben Allman, and I'm the head of sales in Australia and New Zealand for Broadsign. And for those of you who haven't come across Broadsign before, what we do is we provide solutions in the form of software, which make it easier for agencies, advertisers, and media owners to buy, sell, and manage digital out-of-home campaigns. That's a bit of a mouthful to start with, but we're going to keep this session relatively short and succinct, but of course, jam-packed, full of useful information. And all up, it should go for about 20 minutes or so. So let's get straight into it. And as the slide would suggest, today's topic is all about the addressability problem currently being faced by many brands. What you can see here is all of advertising spend globally, and many of you will have seen this slide before, or at least similar versions of it. And the most important thing to note here, or the point I'm trying to make in this, is that while it's taken the best part of 20 years to get there, at this point, digital, or online as I prefer to call it, has eaten almost half of the media dollars that are out there, 48% to be exact. And more recently, while online has been eating up most of the media dollars, programmatic is almost entirely consumed online. Now, this is important for a number of reasons, but most notably, it means that online has become an almost exclusively addressable medium. And what I mean by addressable is that it targets its audience as one individual at a time. So you and I could be on the exact same website at the exact same time, but each be served with an entirely different ad. I should specify, this isn't 100% true. So online isn't an entirely addressable medium. There's still a lot of online and even programmatic online that's done via mass execution. So think of things like homepage takeovers, for example. However, these only account for a teeny tiny slice of the total impressions which are traded online. And this addressability of online, it's got a number of ramifications, particularly for mass brands. And when I say mass brands, I'm talking about brands whose target audience is a very large portion of the population. It's really difficult for these mass brands to build their brand online because they're either, one, relegated to buying remnant inventory, or two, they're left to compete for every individual impression against more niche brands. And that's something which is incredibly difficult to do, as we're going to cover today. And this is one of the key reasons as to why you still see big brands with universal appeal. So think automotives, banks, consumer packaged goods, fast-moving consumer goods, film distributors, and more, investing heavily into television, because TV is still the largest branding medium. Now, I'm oversimplifying things slightly here, but work with me. So think of everything to the right-hand side of this pie chart as addressable media, and everything to the left as mass media. TV, which is the sort of big blue piece of the pie in the bottom left-hand corner, it's easily the largest of the mass media or branding mediums out there. Or is it? One thing that I've learned since working in the world of advertising is that it's not an equitable game. There's still much more witchcraft to it than there is science. And having worked in TV for a fair chunk of my time in advertising, one of the things that still strikes me as being particularly ridiculous is that the majority of branding campaigns are targeted at one particular demographic group, 18 to 35-year-olds. Now, there are a number of theories and ideas as to why this is the case, but the most prominent one is that once people become brand loyal at that stage of their lives, between 18 and 35, they're unlikely or less likely to switch brands later on. Now, one of the interesting things to note about these 18 to 35-year-olds is that they don't watch much linear television. In fact, less than 20% of the TV that they watch, as you can see here, is consumed in a linear fashion, meaning that the rest is most likely delivered via the internet, which includes non-ad supported streaming like Netflix. And as a result, the vast majority of TV ads served to this demographic are both addressable and in many cases skippable as well. And this makes those 18 to 35-year-olds disproportionately hard to reach for mass brands, because your biggest tool for reaching them, TV, which was our big blue slice of the pie in the bottom left-hand corner of this pie chart previously, it's not really there anymore. Now, I should stress here that this isn't because 18 to 35-year-olds can't be reached. It's because the vast majority of the media they consume, almost 3/4 of it, is addressable. And this is a huge, huge problem for mass brands, because just like in online, in an addressable TV environment, mass brands are competing with a niche player for every single impression. And as I mentioned before, this is incredibly difficult to do. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're Kleenex. I assume most of you have heard of Kleenex, or you have Kleenex in your part of the world, but in case you don't, they're a brand of toilet paper, among other things. Your Kleenex and your target audience is everyone with $5 or more who may need to go to the bathroom at some stage in the near future. Our SVP of strategy, Adam Green, who I have to credit with writing much of today's presentation. In fact, I have to credit him with writing most of today's presentation. He defines Kleenex's target audience as everyone with $5 or more and an asshole, but we're not going to go there today. We won't stoop to his low levels. Anyway, I digress. In theory, Kleenex's target audience is everyone, and the product has a low cost per unit. And what this means is that a conversion probably isn't worth as much to Kleenex as it is to most other brands. This is Sonia. Sonia is a real person and also happens to be my wife. And no, she isn't aware that she's being used as a case study today. As you can see, or as you can see now, Sonia is a 34-year-old mother of two. And this makes Sonia the primary target for just about every consumer packaged goods brand on the planet. Now, the reason for this is that mums buy roughly 80% of the household goods. And as much as I like to think that our household is a progressive one, when it comes to doing the weekly shop, which usually involves buying toilet paper, Sonia shoulders most of the load. The problem for Kleenex, though, is that Sonia isn't just a 34-year-old mother of two. She's a 34-year-old mother of two who also loves to run, hates cooking, and is in the market for a new car. So when Sonia's streaming her favorite show, MasterChef Australia, and it's kind of weird that her favorite show is a cooking show, yet she hates cooking. But anyway, in any auction for an ad delivered to Sonia while she's streaming MasterChef, Kleenex is competing with all of these brands. And while Sonia is very much Kleenex's target market, their sweet spot, her conversion matters much more to the likes of Nike, Uber Eats, and Volvo, all of whom have a higher cost per unit and are willing to pay more for her impression as a result. And the problem for Kleenex is that this process is then replicated across all of the Sonias all over the world. A mass brand like Kleenex can pay more for a TV commercial because their target audience is everyone. But in an addressable medium, they lose every impression to a more niche advertiser who cares more about that specific impression than they do. And as a result, mass brands are either paying way more than they can afford to per impression, or they're relegated to buying subpar inventory. Now, this problem isn't just exclusive to TV and online either. The fact that we now refer to radio as audio, for instance, speaks volumes about the way in which that medium is now consumed, with a substantial amount of listening now done via streaming, podcasts, and catch-up services, all of which are largely addressable. So what do we do about it? Sorry, I couldn't help myself with this slide. You could say that subtlety isn't exactly my strong suit. Firstly, what makes out of home or digital out of home, and I'm going to use the two terms interchangeably here, what makes it any different to other so-called mass mediums like TV and radio, which are becoming increasingly addressable? What makes out of home different is that this addressability problem doesn't exist in out of home. And that's because out of home is not an addressable medium. I'm going to repeat that. Out of home is not an addressable medium. Whenever an ad plays on an out of home screen or digital out of home screen, it's almost always exposed to multiple people. And until you and I can walk or drive past the exact same screen at the exact same time and each see an entirely different ad, it's going to remain that way, a non-addressable medium. Now, besides this addressability factor that I've just mentioned or lack thereof, there's also a number of bigger sort of macro level factors which play into out of home's favor here. Across most mediums, audiences are becoming increasingly fragmented. There's a tsunami of content out there, all consumed via a growing multitude of channels and platforms. When I began my career in advertising, working in TV, Australia had a handful of free-to-air networks and a single cable network. That was it. Whereas these days, I wouldn't have enough fingers and toes to count all of the BVOD, SVOD, AVOD, and OTT players in this market alone. The fragmentation is huge, and I wish I had another pie chart to demonstrate it, but I think I've shown you enough pie charts for one day. Out of home, on the other hand, is consumed in one place and one place only, out of the home. And as long as our populations continue to grow, so will out of home's audiences. And I think the other thing to mention here is that the very vast majority of us are out of lockdown now, hopefully for the last time. I'm touching wood as I say that. And yes, the return to normality is going to be a gradual one, but people have got a lot of lost time to make up for. And as a result, they're going to be spending more time out and about in the real world than they ever have before. And that real world presence is another thing which distinguishes out of home from other mediums. Every out of home screen is tangible and it has its own physical location and context. And contextual targeting, it's all the rage at the moment. And so it should be, because for brands who are inevitably going to lose a lot of their go-to targeting options off the back of the phasing out of third-party data and changes to privacy regulation, contextual targeting serves as an awesome alternative. And the fact that out of home is a real world medium, it means that it's an inherently contextual medium as well. And that context can come in many forms. It comes in many different shapes and sizes. The most obvious one is the location of the screen. A screen's location can be a really good proxy for the composition, mindset, and intent of the people that are close to that screen. So, for example, screens in gyms are probably a pretty good place to start if you want your brand in front of people who care about health and fitness. Now, while contextual targeting in out of home can be as simple as running a campaign in a specific location, the opportunities are in fact more expansive than that. There's a whole range of other external factors beyond location, which can make up the context surrounding any digital out of home campaign. So moments such as the time of day, the day of week, traffic conditions, weather conditions, sports scores, stock prices, and more, they can all be used either in addition to or as an extremely effective alternative to audience-based targeting. One of my all-time favorite digital out-of-home campaigns was one that we ran really recently for a hybrid vehicle manufacturer. And they only wanted to run their campaign when the price of oil was more than 125 Aussie dollars per barrel. It's far more expensive than that at the moment, unfortunately. The idea behind this was that people will be more willing to consider making the switch to hybrid or electric when they're paying more for petrol at the Bowsers. The point I'm hopefully making here is that the possibilities for contextual targeting in digital out of home are endless, and they're only limited by two things: your imagination and the data that's available to you. And the best thing about these sorts of data sets is that they're typically 100% privacy compliant, easily accessible, free, and in some cases, they're even available out of the box within your preferred demand side platform or DSP, assuming that you're buying your digital out of home programmatically. Now, in the case of the hybrid vehicle campaign I just mentioned, the data, which was the commodity price or the oil price, it was ready to go within our owned and operated demand side platform Campsite, meaning that the campaign was able to be set up and activated in just minutes. Which brings me on to one of my final points. The fact that digital out of home inventory and audiences can now be purchased programmatically means that the medium can be planned, bought, measured, and reported on in a far easier, more efficient, and more flexible manner. And while I've spent much of today's session positioning out of home as the last true mass marketing option for mass brands, which it is, it's also fair to say that programmatic technology has helped democratize out of home to an extent by making it more accessible and affordable for those more niche brands who often have smaller budgets. And to demonstrate this firsthand, I'm going to give you a very quick 60-second look at how easily digital out of home campaigns can be planned, bought, and reported on via our very own demand side platform, Campsite. Now, whoever recorded this demonstration did it at lightning pace. So I'm going to do my best to keep up, but hopefully this is going to give you a bit of an idea as to just how easy it can be. And we'll be using our Canadian instance of Campsite for today's demonstration. We enter the advertiser name and the campaign name. Once we've done that, we enter any locations or specific locations that we might like to target. In this case, it's Ontario and Quebec, but we can be as specific as we like. It doesn't have to be a province. It can be a street, a Latin long coordinate, a suburb, so on and so forth. We then apply our demographic targeting. In this case, it's a specific age range and an interest and activity segment, being health and fitness. And what it's giving us here is the locations with the highest propensity of these audiences in proximity to them. If we wanted to manually add or remove specific environments here, we can do so as well. And then finally, what we want to do is set the parameters around our campaign. So we're entering the start date, the end date, our budget, how much we're looking to spend, our CPM, and then finally upload creatives, and off we go. Once the campaign starts running, we've got access to comprehensive, transparent, and clear reporting, all within our real-time dashboard as well. And if you need any help at any time, you can do that within the platform. So that's it in a nutshell in regards to Campsite. But it's also worth mentioning, that Campsite isn't the only game in town when it comes to buying digital out of home programmatically. And as a fully fledged programmatic marketplace who offers products on both the buy side and the sell side, Broadsign's goal is to make as much inventory as possible available to as many buyers as possible. And we do that by integrating our supply side platform, Broadsign Reach, with multiple demand sources or DSPs, all of which you can see on your screen right now. If you're already partnered with a demand side platform for your online programmatic buying, chances are that you'll find them on this screen, and please let us know if you can't. And if you've never used a demand side platform before, you don't know what a DSP is and you don't know where to start, that's completely fine as well. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us because that's what we're here for. In summary, in an addressable world with less third-party data and more rigorous privacy regulation, marketers need to be considering new strategies and tactics because the old ones simply aren't going to yield the same results that they used to. By design, as we've established, out of home is not an addressable medium. And as a result, it stands as the last true mass medium. It's also an inherently contextual medium, and thanks to programmatic technology, it's now easier to plan and buy than ever before. So in order to continue building your brand in this changing world, it's time to do the do in 2022. And if you'd like to know more about doing the do, you can scan the QR code on your screen to download Broadsign's Media Buyer's Guide to Programmatic Digital Out of Home. It's a fantastic resource or please don't hesitate to get in touch with me directly via email or LinkedIn. My details are up on this slide. Thank you, everyone, again for your time. I appreciate you joining us and wish you a fantastic morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever in the world you might be.